So tonight we're going to talk about biblical economics. And people say, oh, that is so boring. As boring as economics can be, it is a critical part of life. It is a critical part of the marriage relationship. So we want to start, of course, with a biblical construction. You've heard people say, oh, well, you can really tell what a person loves and what they're really into by looking at their checkbooks, which to a certain extent is true. But it's more than just the checkbook, but the checkbook is a key marker. If we understand that God is the one who gives us everything we need in order to be able to work and to produce income, we understanding that those are things that are given and entrusted to us so that we can lay hold of the resources we need in order to survive in this world. So as we use the gifts that God has given us, we exchange them for capital, for money, and exchange that capital for the tangible goods that we need in order to survive. We need a place to live. We need food to eat. We need clothing to cover our nakedness, especially in bad weather, right? Now, we are blessed by God with the ability to develop wealth, not just to take care of our own needs, but to share with others who are in need, so that we can be obedient to the one another's in the New Testament. And when we look at 1 Chronicles 29, 10 through 13, we see these words. David praised the Lord before the entire assembly. O Lord God, our Father Israel, you deserve praise forevermore. O Lord, you are great, mighty, majestic, magnificent, glorious, and sovereign over all the sky and earth. You have dominion and exalt yourself as ruler of all. You are the source of wealth and honor. You rule over all. You possess strength and might to magnify and give strength to all. Now, our God, we give thanks to you and praise your majestic name. So there are three key points we want to be able to draw from these verses, and where the rest we're going to look at as far as what Scripture talks about financial resources. As believers, when we think about finances, the first thing we need to get from our head to our heart is a principle of stewardship. There's nothing we are or nothing we have that does not belong to God. And because this is so, if we want to live faithful in a way that's faithful to his name and his calling, we must start by asking him how he wants us to manage the things he's entrusted to us for stewardship. That includes the finances. The second key point is, as biblical counselors, we need to be aware that there are two things that easily become the most corrosive to marital unity: lack of praying together and an unbiblical approach to finances. Now, there are other things that are corrosive to marital unity, but the quickest corrosives, if you will, is a lack of praying together and an unbiblical approach to finances. And the idea of praying together is so important. And I can't tell you how many couples are struggling. When I sit down in a marriage counseling the very first time, I say, so talk to me about what your daily prayers are like together. Oh, well, we each pray, but we don't pray together. Okay, so now we got to we don't say it out loud, but now we got to do a Bible study on prayer, because they don't even understand prayer. They don't understand the one another's in the New Testament as brother, sister in Christ. But also an unbiblical approach to finances, because what does Jesus tell us? It is easier for a rope to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get in heaven. Why? Because they don't need God. They got everything they need, finances. They put their faith and trust in finances. But you cannot serve Mammon, the god of wealth, and God. You can't serve both. Everybody's going, why did he say rope? Right? Well, because one of the things that a lot of people don't know is if you look at the Aramaic word for rope, it is one letter difference from the Greek word for camel. What? So what if someone misread, a scribe misread the word, Aramaic word for rope, and wrote it as camel? Maybe. Anyway, just one of those things to ponder. But we understand that it's very easy for us to put more faith and trust in our physical finances, more time and effort and energy into gathering finances and holding on to finances, or being a very poor steward of it. How many of you have known couples where one of them has been very responsible with finances, and the other one just like doesn't seem to have a clue about what responsible financial stewardship is like? Anybody known couples like that, right? Again, that's highly corrosive, because it creates a sense of a lack of safety, a lack of provision, a lack of love. Anyway, the third key point we want to hold on to is that as biblical counselors, if our own finances are not in order, we need to start there. Because it's really counterintuitive to believe that we can counsel others well when the area we're addressing is an area we have not addressed in our own lives, right? You're counseling someone to stay away from gambling, but you got 2 online casinos that you spend time playing at. Kind of hard to pour into another person's life God's construct for those things if it's not part of your own life, don't you think? So one of the things that we're hoping when we do this particular session is that God will use this to help us look at our own finances. And it's really important to help people understand that making mistakes doesn't equal poor stewardship. It means we made a mistake, we made a poor decision. Now, if you make those frequently, there's another problem going on, because now you're in a place of poor stewardship, and that's probably because there's something you're not understanding. There's something you're missing, or something you're not believing. But just because you make a mistake, especially a couple that we prayed and we really believed that this is what God wanted us to do, but it ended up being a catastrophe. Well, hard to believe, but maybe a catastrophe was something that God knew you needed to experience at this particular point. Or maybe it wasn't really the Lord you were hearing. Maybe it was your own emotions, your commitment to make each other happy. I've seen that a lot in these kinds of situations. So anyway, let's talk about 4 basic financial principles. The first one is God owns it all, and we each serve as God's asset managers. The second is we possess, but we do not own. So they're in our care, they're in our possession, right? So if I have a jacket and I leave it in your car, okay, that jacket is in your possession, but it's still my jacket. To possess means to be in control of. It doesn't mean ownership. So remember, words matter, right? The third is we need to be content and trust that God knows and will supply our every need. And fourth, one day we will give an account of our stewardship. So let's look at each of these in order. Let's start with God that owns everything, including us, and we are his managers. As we've seen in other modules, Psalm 8, especially verses 4-6, David says, of what importance is the human race that you should notice them? Of what importance is mankind that you should pay attention to them and make them a little less than the heavenly beings? You grant mankind honor and majesty. You appoint them to rule over your creation. You have placed everything under their authority, under their feet. So this tells us that there's a stewardship. Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Leviticus 25, the land is mine. This is God, and you are but aliens and my tenants. 1 Corinthians 6, you are not your own, you were bought at a price. That means we belong to him. Romans 12:1, therefore I exhort you, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a sacrifice, alive, holy, and pleasing to God, which is your reasonable service. Deuteronomy 8, remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth. Very clear language. 1 Corinthians 4, now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. It's talking about being faithful stewards of that trust. And in Matthew 25, his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. So we see all through that section that God, everything belongs to God, and we are his stewards. We are his asset managers, if you will, including of ourselves. Even our bodies are a stewardship. The second thing is God has promised that he fully knows and will supply all of our needs, emphasis on the word needs. So in Matthew 6, that whole section we see where Jesus says, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, about your body, what you will wear. And then he goes on and explains why. He says, look, take a look at the birds. They do nothing to contribute to their own feeding, but yet your heavenly Father feeds them every day. Don't you realize you're worth, you have a greater value than they do, than they have? You can't even add an hour to your life by worrying, so don't worry. What about clothing? Right? Solomon, all his glory, was not clothed like the flowers of the field. In other words, don't worry. God has already got this planned for and provided for. Luke 8, as the seed that fell among thorns, these are the ones who hear, but as they go on their way, they are choked out by the worries and riches and pleasures of life, and their fruit does not mature. Talking about the parable of the soils. Philippians 4:6, a verse we're all very familiar with. Do not be anxious about anything. Instead, in every situation, through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, make your requests be made known to God. Tell your requests to God. And then a few verses later, my God will supply every need according to his glorious riches in Christ. Well, the important thing about need, we talked about this before, is there's a difference between a legitimate need and a strong desire. A legitimate need is something that without which we will suffer harm. So if it's not a legitimate need, a real need, God doesn't promise to supply that, to provide that. He does promise to provide for every need. So do we need food and shelter? Yes, we do. But a cardboard box behind a dumpster is shelter. And digging scraps out of a dumpster behind a restaurant is food. Now, no one would sign up and say, I want to live in a cardboard box behind a dumpster, and I would rather get my dinner out of a dumpster behind a restaurant. But even in that, God is providing for the need. Our tendency is to take the things we prefer, the things we desire, and say, because I desire this so strongly, it is a need. That's why in Philippians 4, we also see Paul say, I have had an overabundance, and I've had less than nothing. And I have learned to be content in my circumstances. If I really need it, it will be provided. What I need is what God will provide. And if I feel like I need something and God is not providing it, there must be something I need more. And maybe far less comfortable. It may be far more torturous. We have no idea what God is up to. So the point is, we may not be able to know what God is up to, but we can at least know that God is involved. And if we have, if whatever our true need is, God will supply that. Right? God will supply your every need according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. So a simple 5-step plan for helping ourselves, of course, and our counselees get their finances under control. And one of the things that part of this is derived from the ministry that God has entrusted my wife Connie with. Early in our life together, God brought person after person after person to her. He still does, but not with the regularity that he used to. Part of that is because of just her energy level. But recently, he used her to minister to a couple who were in financial bondage and couldn't figure out how to break free. Okay. So the simple 5-step plan starts with, the first one is, if you're not working, start. If you're not working, start. So if somebody would look at these verses that we've got here, someone look at 2 Thessalonians 3:10 and 2 Thessalonians 4:11. Somebody look at Malachi 3:10. Somebody look at Luke 11:42. Somebody look at Proverbs 22:7. Okay. So let's start with 2 Corinthians 3, verse 10. And I'm hoping that all of our biblical counseling students brought a Bible to class tonight. Okay. So 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 10. Someone have that?
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay.
For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule: the one who is unwilling to work shall not eat.
And then verse 14, since you're there.
Take special note of anyone who does not obey our instruction in this letter. Do not associate with them in order that they may feel ashamed. Yet do not,
That's all right. 15 is good.
Yet do not regard them as an enemy, but warn them as you would a fellow believer.
Which is reminiscent of Galatians 6:1, right? If anyone is found in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore that one with a spirit of gentleness. Right? You regard him as a brother. You don't treat him as a blasphemous unbeliever. Okay? So if you are legitimately unable to work, then you devote your energies to finding and using other resources that God has provided. Family, the church, then as a last resort, the state. Look at 1 Timothy 5, 3 through 5, and then verses 8 and 16. 1 Timothy 5, 3 through 5, verses 8 and 16. Who's got that? Anybody?
All right. First Timothy 5, starting with verse 3 through 5.
Yes.
Honor widows who are truly widows. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show godliness to their own household and to make some return to their parents. For this is pleasing in the sight of God. She who is truly a widow, left all alone, has set her hope on God and continues in supplication and prayers night and day.
So this talks about turning to your family, and if the family's unavailable, you turn to the church. What does verse 8 tell us?
But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
Ooh. So that's pretty strong language. And what about verse 16?
If any believing woman has relatives who are widows, let her care for them. Let the church not be burdened, so that it may care for those who are truly widows.
So what he's talking about there, of course, is widows who don't have family members who can take care of them. Do we talk about this in the church very much today? No. What usually happens to those folks? Well, have you applied for welfare? Did you apply for food stamps? Especially if it's in the body of Christ, what happened to all the one another's? Yes, it's a burden. Welcome to the take up your cross daily. It's not supposed to be convenient and comfortable sometimes. Yes, it's hard. It is very hard sometimes. Sometimes you have a parent who's suddenly all on their own, who's one of the most impossible people in the world for you to get along with. And I'm so glad that Paul included in this to Timothy, unless they're hard to get along with. Wait a minute, he didn't include that in there. There's no codicil for that. This shows that the family and the family of God are to care for each other. If that's not possible, if for some reason those people are not doing that, guess what? The state's available, but one of the primary reasons the state's available is because people in the body of Christ abdicated their responsibility before the Lord. And nature abhors a vacuum. God is going to provide for those widows. He's going to provide for those people some way, somehow. And if God's people are not willing to be self-sacrificial and do that. So think about it. So, and I've had this question. So we just are not able. We can barely make ends meet as it is. All right, what about the fellowship that you're a part of, or that your mother-in-law is a part of? Are they able and willing to help? What about the broader body of Christ? We'll talk about this in another session, but one of the things that's really heartbreaking is when you have a large church that has a fund set aside for caring for widows and orphans, for taking care of women who suddenly have kids to take care of on their own, and the spouse that fathered these children is not willing to provide financially for them. And even more and more, we're seeing it go the other way, where suddenly you've got a single father and the mother's got a good paying job, but she's not willing or able. Usually not willing, but sometimes not able. And the church will say, well, we have so much money available for those who are part of our church. All the rest of it is set aside, earmarked for people who are not part of our church. Very large church, mega church, multiple campus church in the Vancouver area that our little ministry took up caring for two women that very large church has said that to, said, well, you've gotten your share, all that we have available. So they had it all the beans all counted. So what does that say? It sends a horrible message, don't you think? All right, the second one is start tithing. So Malachi 3:10 and Luke 11:42, who has that? Malachi 3:10, Luke 11:42.
Luke.
Okay, who's got Malachi 3:10? Come on, some of you got it memorized.
I can read it.
Okay, thank you.
Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it.
Okay, and Luke 11:42.
Luke 11:42 says, But woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue, and every herb, and neglect justice and the love of God. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others.
So Jesus is affirming that tithing is a good rule of thumb to live by. It's no longer a tax, it's no longer a mandate. But one of the things that we counsel people for many years is this is an opportunity for you to really trust God in your finances. Okay. So if you will be prayerfully faithful with this, you will find that the 90% goes further than the 100% would have. And there's no logical earthly explanation for that. We've watched God bless so many families in that faithfulness. Say, okay, Lord, and sometimes people are so poor that tithe is not 10%. Okay. It ends up being less than that percentage-wise. But it's a matter of what is it, when you ask God, what is it you want me to give? Then you give that. You may be surprised. Sometimes he may ask you to give more. Be faithful with that. It's a matter of giving first. Say, okay, this just comes off of what God has provided me because this belongs to him and I'm going to give back so that others can be blessed. That's part of the one anothering. And God will honor that. So Jesus doesn't disavow tithing. He said it's good, but it has to be about the attitude behind it. It's about acts of mercy and justice. It's not about following the letter of the law. It's the heart of the law, what it's there for. So if you're not already doing this, and know your credit score. Who's got Proverbs 22:7?
I do.
Okay.
Let's see. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender.
Right. So if you don't know your credit score, you are ruled by your creditors. And you don't even know your credit worthiness. Why does that matter? Well, let's say you need to buy a car. Let's say you're at a place where you don't have cash to buy a car. Your credit score is going to affect what kind of an interest rate. Now, so, of course, what's his name is going to say, oh, only pay cash for a car, you're 5 years old, whatever. Okay, fine. But you've got a single mom, 4 kids. She needs to have a car that's got some kind of a warranty because she's not going to be able to afford the repair bill as well. So for her, buying a used car doesn't make sense. What about rent? There are some places that will not rent to you if you've got a low credit score. You can't even find a place to live unless it's someplace you don't want your children to be. Know your credit score. Know what. And the thing is if people look at credit score, even getting a job, there are a lot of employers who will look at a person's credit score and say, this person is a bad steward with money. I don't think I want to risk entrusting them with the resources of my company. So it can have a huge impact on a lot of things. Set up a monthly budget. So you take all your monthly expenses and divide that by the number of paydays. Cut out everything that's silly and foolish. And keep in mind that the money that comes in belongs to God first. What's really interesting was so I went through my original training was through the Church of the Nazarene. And one of the books we were required to read in the directed study program was something handbook. I think ministry handbook or pastor's handbook or something. It was written by a Lutheran minister, which oddly enough was being used by the Church of Nazarene. But one of the things that talked about budgeting for the new pastor was to make sure you budget in your nicotine and alcohol expenses for the month. And I'm like, yeah, Nazarenes don't do either one of those things. But it was one of those ironies that whatever your expenses are, you need to budget those in. And if it's not a need, you need to look at cutting it out. And remember that the money that comes in belongs to God first. So if I have to deny myself going to Starbucks once a week, right? And I'm going to take that extra, what, $25, $30 a month, and I'm going to use that as an offering. Ask God to bless someone else with that. You'd be amazed at how far $30, the missing $30 will actually go in your own budget. All right, we're at a place, okay, very quickly, I want to do this before we take a break. Start paying down debt right away, right? Don't owe any, the only thing we're supposed to owe anybody is honor. That's our debt. So what you do is you calculate your outstanding debt, credit cards, cars, student loans, payday loans, all that stuff. And if you're doing payday loans, you need some help. Because those can be a horrible bondage you can never escape from. It's almost like legitimate loan sharking or legal loan sharking. Pay the minimum amount on everything except for the lowest balance. Pay as much as you can over the minimum amount on the debt with the lowest balance. And once this is paid off, repeat this process with the next lowest balance of debt. What's really interesting about this has been around a lot longer than Dave Ramsey. So it's not original to him. This is just financial wisdom that's been part of the church since before he ever had his, I can't remember what his university is. Here's one that's really interesting that has been very powerful in a lot of people's life. Whenever possible, transfer balances to 0% credit cards and pay those off within the 0% time frame, usually 18 months, right? So you transfer the balances over. So everything you're paying is going for the debt amount and not interest. Pretty smart, right? Now, the counselor needs to begin this process by doing an initial assessment of the crisis level the counselee is in. What are the short-term financial needs? Do they need cash? Do they need food? Do they need shelter? Do they need to open or close a bank account? Do they need to contact creditors? Do they need help with paying bills? What is their short-term financial need? What is their crisis need right now? The second is, what are their long-term financial needs? Childcare expenses, legal fees, medical dental care, transportation, job training and certification, physical therapy, counseling. Whom have they contacted already, and whom should they contact going forward for the help they need? Family, close friends, church, private agencies, government agencies. What resources available? Start close in and move out. And then the next step is, once this campaign is well underway, it's time to start asking God for opportunities to give to others out of our need. And what's really interesting is what Luke says in Acts 20. Makes an observation, and he talks about he talks about the church at the church in Mesopotamia. He says, and Paul talks about this, in all things I've shown you that by working in this way, you must help the weak, remembering the words of the Lord Jesus, how he himself said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So he's talking about give out, even you give out of your need. And there was a church that gave out of their sense of need, their sense of what they lacked, to support the even poorer church that was at Jerusalem. And Paul said they are adept at giving and receiving. They had been poured into. Now they had less than they had before, but they're pouring back out of what had been poured into them, even though they had very little. And they were honored for that. They were blessed for that. And one of the things that we find with people who are in need, when they start learning to give out of their need, their sense of need diminishes quite a bit. And one of the things that always just amazed me We worked with homeless and inner city families in Vancouver for a long time. And the most giving people were the poorest people. They would, you had a family that said, yeah, our food stamps didn't come. We don't know what happened. We don't know. And everybody, they're gathering stuff out of their cupboards to try to help this family have food to eat. Not just for today, but for the next several days until the food stamps come in. Oh, well, I'll pray for you and trust that God will take care of you. That's what you hear from people often who don't have a sense of need. But it's usually the people with a sense of need. And sometimes I think that's why God allows us to go through a period of real need. So we have a compassion and an empathy for those who are in need. All right, let's take a break here. We'll come back. Granted, we're talking about very practical things this evening, because a lot of people just lack an understanding of healthy financial management. Some people don't have a biblical paradigm for stewardship of finances and resources. Other people have gotten bogged down in bondage as a result of just one, not just bad decision, but sometimes a series of unfortunate circumstances that have put them in dire straits financially. The goal is to have a biblical understanding, lay out some practical helps, but the number one focus needs to be our attitude toward our finances. If we put too much dependence on them, they become an idol and they cannot help but let us down. But if we see them as something that God provides us as a tool to take hold of the things we need in life, food, shelter, all those kinds of things, and a way to bless others, it goes a long, long way. So let's talk about biblical attitudes toward money. Remember, what we love is what we serve. 1 Timothy 6:10 says, for the love of money is the root of all evils. Not money is, but the love of money. Some people, in reaching for it, have strayed from the faith and stabbed themselves with many pains. They've created suffering for themselves. Now, this is so often misquoted that it's sadly tragic. Money is not evil, the love of it is. Having $1 million in your bank account doesn't mean that you love it. Having $5 in your bank account doesn't prove that you don't. An example, R.G. Letourneau is well known for living on 10% and giving 90% of his money away for the sake of the kingdom. So he went from $100,000 in debt to being one of the wealthiest men on earth. And he credits God's faithfulness to his own faithful surrender of his finances. And when he passed away in 1980, his legacy of Christian generosity was well established. Letourneau University and Letourneau Christian Center donate millions every year to further the work of individual Christians and Christian organizations. They actually have a grant program that very few Christians and Christian organizations bother to do grant requests for. But it's something that's really worth looking into. Second, we need to learn to be content in our circumstances, even though we may not be content with our circumstances. And we talk often about how words matter, and it's often the small words that matter most. The circumstances you're in right now are not the circumstances you were in, and they're not the circumstances you're going to be in. So the circumstances you are in are temporary. So the writer to Hebrews says, your conduct must be free from the love of money. And you must be content with what you have, for he has said, I will never leave you and I will never abandon you. So we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper and I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? So our ability to do this comes from our willingness to believe what God has declared about himself and his heart toward us. He will provide every legitimate need. We also need to be involved in giving to others as part of our Christian life, Christian walk in faith. Like we saw in Acts 20, verse 35, by all these things I've shown you that by working in this way, we must help the weak and remember the words of the Lord Jesus, that he himself said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Giving sets us free, while hoarding entraps us. Giving changes the lives of others. We see in John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave. Giving brings blessing back to us. Giving allows us to store up treasures in heaven rather than here on earth. Plus, giving blesses the giver as well as the receiver. And we need to be in on that. Think about how you feel when you're able to give something to someone that speaks to their heart, or it's something that meets a need. Think about how blessed you feel. Giving and receiving bless both the giver and the receiver. That's the economy of God's kingdom. And we need to avoid getting into debt if at all possible. Remember Proverbs 22:7, the rich rule over the poor and the borrower servant to the lender. So getting out of debt is not easy, and it often requires a fight, but the freedom that comes with it is so worth it. And sometimes it can be a very, very long battle. One family that we worked with worked 7.5 years to get out of debt. And I know a young couple who are celebrating their 2nd anniversary tomorrow, who they got married right after they both graduated. They focused the last 2 years on paying off their student debt, and they did that. Sometimes she was working 2 jobs, sometimes he was working 3. But their goal was to not be in bondage to the lender until they are in their 60s or 70s, like some people are. Now, that's not for everybody, but they made a commitment. They asked God for help. He provided everything they needed. So they were able to do that. So it's really important for us to take a look at, what does the Bible say about debt? So before you help a person begin their journey out of debt, or you begin your own journey out of debt, we need to understand what the Bible says about debt. Now, knowing these truths can help us build our faith, since faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So once we have, and we help our counselee have a solid understanding of what God has to say about debt, then we and they can pray boldly about that debt and do so in faith. So what does the Bible say about debt? The borrower is a slave to the lender. When you are in debt to another person, you enter into a slave-master relationship with your creditor. Now, it's not as stark as the slave-master relationship that has been, part of, world history in certain ways, but in other ways, it's very similar. Your first obligation becomes paying that creditor. And if you don't, the penalties are severe. Right? God wants us to lend to others. And obviously, this is difficult if you don't have anything to lend. What's really interesting is we're required to pay back what we borrow. And it's really easy to take this lightly, but if we borrowed it, we are to pay it back. What's really important to understand is that on the other side of that, in Luke, he says, lend without expectation of repayment. Well, that's giving. Yep, you got it. If someone pays it back, great. If they don't, okay. It doesn't belong to us in the first place. We can hope that they would pay that back, but what if they don't? Do we really need them to pay it back? If it's something we have a need of, God will provide it, even if it's not through them. And what the Bible does not say about debt, the Bible does not say that it is a sin to be in debt. Remember, God wants the best for us. He doesn't want us to be in debt, but he also doesn't say that being in debt is a sin. It can create bondage, it can create struggles, but it doesn't say that it's a sin. So what are the biblical promises about debt? Well, Jesus came to set us free from the bondage of sin. We were slaves to sin until he set us free. So did he only want us to be free in one area, or does he want us to be free in all? Does he want us to be free in one area and slave in others? No. So in Deuteronomy 28:12, we see the Lord will open for you his good storehouse, the heavens, to give rain to your land in its season, and to bless all the work of your hand. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. This is one of the problems that we kind of stand on when we're praying about our debt. It's not about the exact promise, but it's about God's faithfulness to caring for those who are faithful in their walk with him. So we take a look at the prerequisite that's in verse 1 of this chapter. He says, those who diligently obey the Lord your God. So this is part of how God responds to our faithful obedience, is that he honors that. He will care for us in ways that we can't even imagine in our unfaithfulness. So it's not just a matter of being faithful in finances, it's being faithful in our whole walk and relationship with him. Now, God will not keep us out of debt. As much as God would love to see us living debt-free, we have to remember that as stewards of the money he's entrusted us, we have free will to do what we want to with it. We can choose to give it, to save it, to spend it, or even spend more than we actually have. That's where debt comes in. Now, God partners with us and works with us and on our behalf to help us get out of debt. But we have a big part to play in that. So the first thing is stop spending more than we have. It doesn't matter how much God provides. As long as we're spending more money than we have, we'll always be in debt. Is God going to provide what we need? Yes. Now, sure, there are things in our economy, the economy of our day, that some people don't have an option other than to go in debt. The thing is it a manageable debt? Like a car payment, is it something that's manageable, or is it something that's going to put an undue burden on you? Is there a wiser way to do this? Is there a way you need to do this differently for a season? All right. So remember, these are not hard and fast. These are principles to try to live by. And remember that this is bigger than us. As Christians, we have the opportunity to use our finances to build God's kingdom, and every decision we make with our money may be larger than we realize. It's very easy to get caught up in trying to store up treasures on earth when we know we're supposed to be storing treasures in heaven. So when we commit our finances to serve God first, we do that through prayer. We do that in our heart. Say, okay, Lord, we want our finances to serve you first, whatever that looks like. Then what he does is he prompts us to recognize when we are loving money and when we are loving him. So here's a little case study to kind of look at. Couples present a great deal of diversity of family, background, personal experience, and religious context when they come for counseling. The more diverse, the more challenging the counseling often needs to be. So not long ago, this broad diversity was unusual. Because why? Well, most couples grew up in the same neighborhood. They came from the same religious heritage. They chose mates of the same economic and cultural levels and backgrounds. And frequently the parents knew each other. Their extended families knew each other. So without very much work at all to achieve harmony, they had corresponding philosophies of life. So with this couple, Kevin and Barbara, they had very little that they agreed on. The last 4 years of their lives have been because of very similar common school experiences and exposure to the philosophy of the Christian life that they heard from the chapel podium when they attended college together. However, the key questions that we need to consider: to what extent have Barbara's Roman Catholic thought patterns changed since her conversion at 17? What about the influence of the affluence of Kevin's family on his idea about finances? As you talk with them a little more, the diversity they bring to this about finances starts to alarm you a little bit. It really needs to, because even a casual examination of scripture, from Abraham seeking a mate for his son, from his own extended family, to Jews marrying within Judaism, and then to the New Testament warning regarding an unequal yoke, there's encouragement that those who are called to serve as shepherds and as biblical counselors need to be watchful of Christ's sheep as they move into and around marriage. So let's assume that Kevin and Barbara both make credible confessions of faith, and that they are committed to a truly biblical model for marriage. And let's assume that they're committed to biblical methods of problem solving. What can you, as a biblical counselor, do to help them make a success of the marriage that's been entrusted to them? What they need to realize is that each of them come from their own mini subculture. So the social structure that they come from has had a huge influence on their thinking, and that in the first few years of marriage, they're going to be sorting out where they come from has a huge impact on the non-conscious responses they have to each other and to the situations that they find themselves in. So this adjustment period in marriage is going to be a creation of a new mini subculture where both are going to be able to be blessed. When we talk about he comes from family A, she comes from family B, they form family C. They're developing their own subculture. So when it comes to finances, you can help Kevin and Barbara look at the various aspects of where they come from, their mini subculture, and asking each one of them to reflect back over their home life and list the characteristics of important events, customs, and special circumstances. And this can be very helpful for couples. So let's take birthdays. Are birthdays about always being made to feel special, or they're never a big deal? What about vacations? Traveled a lot or never could afford them? What about church? Formal liturgical services or relaxed spirit-led services? What about meals? Never ate meals together as a family because dad worked nights, or they ate together at least 3 nights a week. What about tithing? Foreign concept, or have to do it no matter what? And then what about spending? Always had what we needed, never had enough. So when they bring this assignment in, you have them sit next to you and you draw a large circle on a blank sheet of paper. Now you want to work your way through their lists and help them talk through their thoughts and feelings about what's on the lists. Then what you want to do is you want to walk through what the scriptures have to say about the financial matters. Now this can be done to address any area of trouble, but finance is an easy one. It's a very obvious one to work with. So have them start writing down inside the circle on the paper how they're going to agree to address these matters. So at any point there's a disagreement, you want to bring them back to the scriptures and talk about not only how the scriptures address this, but remind them that they've agreed to do the best they can to apply biblical principles to the problem area. And it's one of those working homework things that you continue to remind them of and have them continue to revisit and say, okay, this is what we agreed to. How are we going to fulfill this agreement to each other? Right? We made an agreement. How are we going to fulfill this agreement to each other? And remember, they need to do this prayerfully and partner with God on it. So real basic advice, right? Live within your means. In other words, spend less than you earn. Be frugal, but not stingy. John Wesley said, make all you can and save all you can and give all you can. So we want to practice developing generosity. And then do what you love. And this is very difficult sometimes, but I had a conversation with someone earlier today. There's more to life than money. So perhaps God would have you take a job that pays less over one that pays more that you don't enjoy. Or perhaps God would change your heart about the job you're in. You want to seek God's counsel and what his will is, and then you do that. I had a job that I hated. I did not like it. I didn't like the job. I didn't like the company I worked for. It paid really well. And what I would rather be doing is what I'm doing now. Okay. The thing is that until I was a good steward of the job I had and the position I had in this company, and was more focused on what kind of a godly influence I was going to be able to be and how well I represented Christ, God didn't say it out loud, but the sense I got eventually was, you're staying here until you change your attitude. So once I really surrendered that to God, and God started changing my heart toward my employer and my job and the people I worked with and around, it started to have a huge impact on the company, especially the place I worked out of, but the broader company. And then eventually God said, okay, you're done here. It's time to move on to what you really wanted in the first place. But I couldn't trust you with it because you weren't being trustworthy with what I trusted you with. And that was that particular job at that particular company. So then I was able to do what I loved. So in other words, God had to change my heart about the job I was in before he could change the job I was in. Now remember, money doesn't make you happy. So if your career, your job is tied to how much money you can make at it instead of what you love to do, you're very likely to make money yet lack peace. So if money is your focus, you need to ask, am I worshiping money and what it can get for me rather than God and how I can serve him? Now, that doesn't mean that if you're in this job because it provides the resources you and your family need, that's not the point. The point is, am I doing this because I really believe this is how I can best serve God? Or am I doing this just because it gets me what I want? Don't get too good at the wrong stuff. Remember, the number one enemy of best is often good. So there are many good things that you can do, but few are God's best for you and your family. So we need to ask God to help you prioritize your time, your talents, and your strength. And then don't oversave. Life is about balance. God gives us our daily bread. Joseph was instructed to save for the 7 years of famine. There was both. So saving needs to be part of the financial plan, but we ought not put off all living until you retire, because God designed us to rest and enjoy what he's provided. God has given us all things to enjoy. Remember when he put Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, he said, eat to your heart's content. Just don't eat that over there, but eat to your heart's content. And do not neglect the trust property. In other words, part of good stewardship is keeping the property that God has entrusted to us clean and in good repair. It's about good stewardship, not slothfulness. We need to be attentive, not careless. Careless inattention does not pay attention to where money goes or what it goes for. That's why making and following a budget, keeping a checkbook balanced, and living within your means are absolutely important. What's really interesting is people say, oh, well, I hate the idea of a budget. Why? Why do you hate the idea of budget? Oh, we never do that. Or why? Help me understand what's wrong or bad about a budget. Sometimes it's just an emotional reaction to the idea. Sometimes they say, well, I've never figured out how to do a budget. Guess what? Maybe you're the person that can help them do that. And like we've been talking, the basics of that are pretty simple. Next is one of my favorites. Do not feed the pig. This goes hand in hand with the previous one. Impulse buying is driven by a sense of entitlement to feed the pig, personal instant gratification. So remember, delayed gratification is a sign of maturity, which is what we are called to. We're called to be mature. The items you see around a check stand at the store, or when you go to one of those stores like Home Goods or TJ Maxx, and you got this long winding line to get to the next available check stand. They have all of these neat impulse items, and they're called that because they're hoping that you'll look at it and on impulse you'll grab it and you'll add it to your cart. Don't follow the herd. There's some truth to the idea that there's safety in numbers, but that's not always the case. You know, think about lemmings, right? There's a certain time of year in a certain area where all the lemmings start running and they run off a cliff and they just all run together. And the more I learn and the more mature I become, the more areas I find that I'd really rather do something that's the opposite of what the rest of the herd is doing. I want to do what God is asking of me more than I want to do what everybody else is doing. But again, that's a sign of maturity. So we say, okay, I'm not going to follow the herd unless the herd is correct. Right? God is the one that will grant us wisdom about that when we ask him for it. We need to develop a healthy skepticism. I can't even tell you how many conversations I've had, especially with younger people. But sometimes people that have been into these things for decades, this has worked hand in hand with the previous piece of advice. We need to never let our skepticism keep us from opening our mind to new possibilities, but we also need to not be naive. The naive believes everything, but the prudent man considers his steps. So there's a lot of stuff out there that says, oh, just do this. These are side hustles, and these are ways to make money. And you know, you just put in the right amount of work. And a lot of times those ideas of you just invest this much every week and you'll be amazed at how much money rolls in. Right? The get rich quick ideas, the people that have sold you that idea are the ones that are going to be making the money, not you. And I know people that have gone from one of those things after another, year after year after year after, and they never tire. That ties in with the next one. Ignore short-term market swings, the lottery, and other get-rich-quick approaches. Wealth gained quickly will dwindle away, but the one who gathers it little by little will become rich. The one who works his land will be satisfied with food, but whoever chases daydreams will have his fill of poverty. A faithful person will have an abundance of blessings, but the one who hastens to gain riches will not go unpunished. We have to understand that sow and reap is a principle of life, and it's a principle of the kingdom of God. You're going to sow 10 little seeds and you're going to reap 100 million acres. It doesn't work that way. And if you're sowing stinkweed, you're not going to sow strawberry. You're not going to reap strawberries. If you want to reap strawberries, you've got to sow and tend strawberries. It takes work. There's this idea of do this, and very quickly you'll see it just explode. While that can happen, it rarely happens. So helping people understand, you may accidentally stumble on something that does that for you, but that's not the norm. That is not the economy of God's kingdom. It's faithful stewardship. Because remember, God says 6 days you will toil, and on the seventh rest. We're going to work. We're going to work. And sometimes it's going to be very difficult and hard work. But we are going to work. God worked 6 days, created the universe. Nothing wrong with work. We're not supposed to develop an allergy for work. Work is not a 4-letter word. It's actually an honor to be entrusted with working and reproducing. We've been talking about fruitfulness all through this whole module. We're looking at marriage. We're looking at fruitfulness in the family. That's far more than just having children. All kinds of fruitfulness. So anyway, that's what I have for this evening on this. Thoughts or questions or feedback at all?